Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Elara sat on the edge of the village well, her fingers trailing absently over the cool stone as she listened to the distant hum of activity. The villagers bustled around her, voices rising and falling like the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. She imagined the scene in her mind, the way she had since childhood, people moving, water sloshing from buckets, chickens clucking by the coop. Though she had never seen any of it with her own eyes, she had learned to paint vivid pictures in her mind using her other senses. Being blind since birth, Elara had always relied on the kindness of others to navigate her world. Yet, deep within her heart, there was a yearning, an insistent tug to see the world as it truly was, to understand the colors and shapes that everyone else spoke about so freely. It was this yearning that had driven her to seek out the elders, to ask about the stories she'd overheard as a child. Stories of the Fountain of Magic, a legendary spring said to grant power beyond measure and the ability to heal any ailment, even blindness. The elders had chuckled at first, amused by the idea of a blind girl going on such a quest. But one of them, an old man with a soft, gravelly voice, had leaned forward and whispered, "The fountain is real, child. But the journey is not easy, and its gifts come with a price." Elara had thanked him, her heart racing with the possibility of finding the fountain. Now, as she sat by the well, she knew it was time to leave her village behind and search for it. She would embark on the journey alone if she had to. She might not be able to see, but she had learned to navigate the world in her own way, using her sharp hearing, keen sense of smell, and the mental map she had created over the years. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the cool night air swept in, Elara gathered what little she had, a simple walking stick, a leather pouch of food, and a small water skin. Her parents, though worried, didn't try to stop her. They knew the fire within her heart could not be extinguished by their fears. "Be safe, Elara," her mother whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Trust in the journey, and trust in yourself." With a final embrace, Elara turned away from her home and set off into the night. Her feet tapped rhythmically on the familiar dirt path, the cool wind guiding her toward the unknown. Days passed as she traveled, her senses alert to every change in the environment. The sound of birdsong, the scent of blooming flowers, the rustle of the forest as she passed through it, these became her markers, her way of understanding the world she could not see. She felt the magic of the land humming beneath her feet, a faint and distant promise of what lay ahead. One morning, as the sun filtered through the trees, she heard footsteps approaching. Elara tensed, gripping her walking stick a little tighter. The steps were light but deliberate, moving with the kind of precision that suggested someone used to the wilderness. "You're far from home, aren't you?" came a voice from the shadows. Elara tilted her head in the direction of the voice. "I could say the same about you." A soft chuckle followed, and soon a figure stepped into view, or rather, into Elara's awareness. She couldn't see him, but she could hear the slight rasp in his voice, the way his boots crunched over leaves, and the faint smell of leather and steel. "My name's Kieran," he said, his tone light and friendly. "I'm a hunter." "And you?" "Elara," she replied. "I'm looking for the Fountain of Magic." Kieran let out a low whistle. "Aren't we all? But it's not exactly a journey for someone to take alone." "I don't have a choice," Elara said quietly. "I have to find it." Kieran was silent for a moment, as if weighing her words. "Well," he said finally, "you're in luck. I happen to be heading in the same direction. Maybe we can help each other out." Elara hesitated, unsure if she could trust this stranger. But something about Kieran's voice put her at ease. He didn't sound like a threat, more like someone with his own burdens to carry. And perhaps, just perhaps, having a companion might make the journey a little less lonely. All right, she agreed. We can travel together. Kieran gave a nod, though Elara couldn't see it. She felt the shift in the air as he moved to her side, and together they continued down the path, their footsteps falling into a steady rhythm. As they walked, Kieran spoke about the places he'd seen, the wild creatures he'd hunted, and the legends he'd heard about the fountain. It's said to be hidden in a cavern, deep in the mountains, Kieran explained. Guarded by powerful magic that tests anyone who tries to reach it. Tests? Elara asked. Kieran shrugged. That's the story, anyway. But no one's ever come back to say for sure. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine, but she pushed the fear aside. She couldn't turn back now. Days turned into weeks as they traveled together, and soon their companionship grew into an unspoken bond. Kieran taught her how to listen for the subtle sounds of danger in the forest, how to sense the change in the wind that signaled rain, and how to trust her instincts when everything else seemed uncertain. In return, Elara shared her own insights, her ability to see with her heart rather than her eyes, and her unwavering determination to find the fountain. It wasn't long before they encountered their next companion, Silas, a brooding wizard who had been following the same path. He appeared one evening as they made camp near a river, his dark robes swirling around him like shadows in the fading light. "I've been watching you," Silas said, his voice low and measured. "You seek the fountain of magic." Elara straightened, unsure of this new stranger. "Yes, we do. I have my own reasons for finding it," Silas said, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "Magic as powerful as that should not be left in the hands of anyone unworthy." Kieran raised an eyebrow. "And what makes you worthy?" "I am not here to prove myself to you, Hunter," Silas replied coldly. "But I believe that together, we stand a better chance of reaching the fountain." Elara felt the tension between the two men, but she knew they needed all the help they could get. "We should work together," she said, her voice firm. "The journey is hard enough without us turning on each other." Kieran sighed, but he relented. "Fine. But don't expect me to trust you just yet, wizard." Silas nodded, his expression unreadable, and the three of them continued their journey. Despite his aloofness, Silas proved to be a valuable companion, using his magic to shield them from the harsher elements and guide them through treacherous terrain. Yet, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that Silas had his own agenda, one that might not align with hers. As the days wore on, they faced trial after trial. A dense, enchanted forest nearly swallowed them whole, its twisted branches and illusionary magic threatening to drive them mad. But it was Elara's blindness that saved them. While the others struggled to discern reality from the illusions, Elara's lack of sight allowed her to guide them safely through. She used her senses to feel the way the air shifted, the ground beneath her feet, and the whispers of the wind to avoid the traps that ensnared her companions. When they emerged from the forest, battered but alive, Kieran gave Elara a look of newfound respect. "You saved us back there," he said quietly. "I don't think I would have made it without you." Elara smiled faintly. "Sometimes it's not about what you can see, but what you can feel." Their journey continued, and soon they reached the Dragon's Pass, a narrow, winding path through the mountains. Here, they encountered their final companion, Lyra, a fierce warrior with a blade strapped to her back and fire in her eyes. She had been traveling alone, searching for the fountain to save her dying brother, who had fallen ill with a curse no healer could lift. Lyra eyed the group warily as they stood at the mouth of the pass. Her grip tightened on her sword hilt, her posture tense, as though any wrong move might lead to a confrontation. Kieran raised his hands in a gesture of peace, but Alara sensed the deeper tension between them. Lyra was not here to make friends, she was here on a mission, just like the rest of them. Yet, her determination resonated with Alara. The desperation of her quest was something they all shared, even if their goals differed. "We're all searching for the same thing," Alara said softly, turning her head in Lyra's direction. "There's no need to fight." Lyra's eyes flicked toward Alara, and something softened in her expression. "You're blind," she said, not unkindly, but with a note of disbelief. "And yet you lead this group?" Alara smiled faintly. "I don't lead. We walk together." For a moment, Lyra's rigid posture relaxed. She stepped forward, her eyes scanning the group once more before nodding. "I'll join you. But know this, I'm here for one reason, and if I have to choose between your lives and my brother's, I'll make that choice without hesitation." Kieran muttered something under his breath, but it was Silas who spoke next, his voice cold and calm. "None of us are here without purpose. But you'll find that the fountain demands sacrifices of us all." With Lyra now part of their company, the group moved deeper into the Dragon's Pass, the path narrowing as sheer cliffs loomed on either side. The wind howled through the pass, carrying with it a bone-chilling cold. The rough terrain forced them to slow down, each step carefully measured to avoid slipping into the abyss that lay below. Kieran scouted ahead, his keen eyes searching for signs of danger, while Silas used his magic to cloak them from the elements as best he could. The deeper they went, the more the land seemed to resist them. The very air felt charged with an ancient magic, as though the mountain itself sought to test their resolve. And yet, Alara pressed on, her heart filled with a strange certainty that they were drawing closer to the fountain. She couldn't explain how she knew, but she could feel the magic pulling her forward, a soft hum in her chest that grew stronger with each passing hour. But it wasn't long before the mountain threw its first true challenge at them. One evening, as they made camp in a sheltered alcove, the ground began to shake. At first, it was a faint tremor, barely noticeable. But within moments, it grew into a violent quake that sent rocks tumbling from above. Kieran yelled for them to take cover as the cliffside crumbled, sending debris crashing down around them. "Watch out!" he shouted, pulling Alara to the side just as a boulder smashed into the ground where she had stood moments before. Silas raised his staff, muttering incantations under his breath as a shimmering barrier of light formed above them, deflecting the worst of the falling rocks. But it was Lyra who acted the quickest, her sword flashing as she cleaved through the larger stones that threatened to crush them. The quake lasted only minutes, but it left the group breathless and shaken. As the dust settled, they saw the true nature of the challenge before them. The path ahead had been blocked by a massive rockslide, cutting off their only way forward. "We'll have to find another way around," Kieran said, grimacing as he surveyed the damage. "No," Alara said, her voice steady. "This is the way." Kieran frowned. "The path's blocked. We can't go through that." Alara knelt down, placing her hand on the ground. She could feel the remnants of magic pulsing through the earth beneath her fingertips. This was no ordinary rockslide. The mountain was testing them, forcing them to prove their determination. "There's a way," she said quietly. "We just need to trust it." Silas raised an eyebrow, his skepticism evident, but he said nothing. Instead, he began to weave another spell, and slowly, the rocks began to shift. It wasn't much, just a narrow gap, barely wide enough for one person at a time, but it was enough. One by one, they squeezed through the gap, emerging on the other side to find the path continuing into a dark tunnel that led deep into the mountain. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient stone. Every step they took seemed to echo in the silence, the darkness pressing in around them like a living thing. That it was here, in the heart of the mountain, that they faced their greatest test. As they walked, the tunnel began to change. The walls shimmered with a strange light, and soon, they found themselves in a vast underground chamber, the ceiling so high that it vanished into the darkness above. In the center of the chamber stood a towering stone arch, inscribed with runes that pulsed faintly with magic. The gateway to the fountain, Silas breathed, his eyes wide with awe. But as they approached, a figure stepped out from the shadows. He was tall and robed in black, his face hidden beneath a hood. His voice echoed through the chamber, cold and commanding. "You have come seeking the fountain of magic," he said, his tone devoid of emotion. "But not all of you will pass." Kieran's hand went to his sword, but Alara stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of the figure's gaze on her, though she couldn't see him. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice calm despite the fear gnawing at her. "I am the guardian of the fountain," the figure replied. "And I will decide who is worthy." Before any of them could react, the ground beneath them shifted, and each of them was pulled into a different part of the chamber, separated from one another by invisible barriers. Alara felt the cold air rush past her as she was flung into a smaller alcove, the sounds of her companions fading into the distance. She was alone. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "Why do you seek the fountain?" the guardian's voice echoed in her mind, though there was no one else in the alcove with her. Alara took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the cool stone walls around her. "To see," she answered truthfully. "To understand the world as it really is." "Is that all?" the voice pressed. "Is your desire for sight greater than your desire to help others?" Alara hesitated, her heart torn. She had come this far because of her longing to see, to experience the world in the way that others did. But along the journey, she had learned to see with her heart, to feel the magic and beauty in the world in a way that no sighted person ever could. And now, standing on the threshold of the fountain, she realized something she hadn't understood before. "Seeing isn't just about having eyes," she whispered. "I've already seen so much. But the power of the fountain, if I use it just for myself, then I'll have gained nothing." The silence that followed was heavy, as though the very air held its breath, waiting. "You are worthy," the guardian's voice said at last, and the barrier around her dissolved. Alara stepped forward, her heart light as she rejoined her companions, each of them having faced their own trials. Kieran's face was pale, but his eyes held a newfound resolve. Lyra's shoulders were tense, but there was a softness in her expression that hadn't been there before. Even Silas seemed changed, his usual arrogance tempered by something deeper. Together, they stepped through the stone archway, into the final chamber where the fountain awaited. It was a simple thing, a pool of crystal-clear water set into the ground, but the magic it radiated was overwhelming. It filled the air with a soft hum, as though the very earth was alive with power. Alara knelt beside the fountain, her heart racing. She could feel its magic thrumming beneath her fingertips, the power to heal, to restore, to change everything. But as she touched the water, she knew what she had to do. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for the world, and the magic answered.